Hello, I'm back and I'm filming a video. That's not a good introduction. What is up guys? I'm Nisha and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the 10 eyeshadow palettes that I would keep if I could only keep 10 eyeshadow palettes and talking way too much. So if that's something that you're interested in, keep on watching. So before I really get into it, I want to say that this tag was created by Annette's Makeup Corner, but I was inspired to do it from Amy Loves Makeup and Angelica, so credit where credit is due. So this was kind of difficult because I have about 50 eyeshadow palettes. Don't look at me, but yeah, here's just 10 eyeshadow palettes that I really enjoy. I did one eyeshadow palette tag where it was like a palette that makes you happy, a palette that makes you think of this, a palette that makes you think of that. And there are some repeats, but not a lot, I think, if I can remember. But for some reason, somewhere along the way, I got it into my head like 10 eyeshadow palettes that if I were trapped on a desert island and still needed to do my eyeshadow, I could have. So I ended up pulling some that I love but need like other palettes to work with, and so then I would pull some of the other palettes that I worked with. It's weird, but I think I'm gonna put my thoughts into a somewhat comprehensive way to say things. So let's start this off. So my first palette is the Colourpop Orange You Glad palette. It looks like this. I don't know if you can see how well loved it is because the colors are very bright and vibrant. I don't know if you're able to see the dips, or like, for me, this Colourpop formula, it's the kind of matte where you don't really see like a dip for a long time. You just see like the brush strokes from your brush dipping into it. But I do have a mini baby pan on Clementine. I don't think you're able to tell just because it is a glitter. But I really like this palette. It is very vibrant and it's colorful without being like colorful, if that makes sense. Like a bright orange eyeshadow is a little bit easier to swallow for some people than like a bright purple, but it is very easy to use this palette with other palettes that I like that might not be the best for me. I'll get into a couple a little bit later. There's some palettes that just don't work well with my skin tone, and this one I very much use to help get that. Also, this glitter is like, oh, put that down. This glitter is like my favorite glitter in any palette, full stop, ever. And yeah, I'm just, this made me fall in love with like Colourpop's eyeshadow formula. I bought this palette and another palette that's here at like the same time, and I used them both and it was just a really good time. I loved my eyeshadow every single time, so Orange You Glad. The next palette is actually one that I have on my eyes today. That pink into gold shifting shade that you can see is from the It's Belle Cosmetics Break the Rules palette. Specifically Just Watch, but I am doing a 3 looks 1 palette. I did kind of like a first impressions where I used these 3 shades, and now I'm trying to use like the rest of them. So I've already filmed a purple look, now I've done this, and now I guess I'm gonna use, I gotta use Your Choice Bold and Rebel. Well, I've already used Rebel in a look, so I'm probably just gonna try and do Your Choice and Bold, but I really like the way my eyeshadow looks today. I really like this formula. There are 2 formulas. There's like a duochrome and a not duochrome, but every shade has sparkle in it. But both of the formulas perform like equally well. Some of the duochromes are a little bit more flaky. You can see my dips in like all of these shades. I really like Stay Radical. It is like a peach into green duochrome, and I have already hit pan in it. I use this shade on my inner corners a lot on days where like I do my makeup but I don't necessarily film it. But I really like this palette. I was kind of scared to get an all shimmer palette because I don't really like mixing and matching things on my channel, but I feel like since I'm doing a project pan and I can like, it helps me use the matte shades in my project pan along with this, and I really like this formula. I've already bought the sequel. I think I actually just got a tracking update for it, so standout formula. I love this, and yeah, I'm happy to support a small indie Latina owned brand. So the next palette is the whatever by Colourpop. She looks like this. She's neutral and I love her. And normally I would say like don't take a shot every time I use a Colourpop palette, but I feel like for this video you can take a shot every time I use a Colourpop palette if you want to have a good time, because it's half the palettes, and I'm sorry, but I do really like Colourpop's formula. But my favorite color is red. And so like these three shades, I know this one might not look red, but it is like an orange red duochrome. I feel like all of these shades are like my fall dream, but also every shade complements like the reds that I use very, very well. Charty, it's a super shock. I'll typically use it like on my brow bone, in my highlight, or on top of like my highlight, and that will help. But other than that, like this is more of like a purple tone. It's not really like burgundy, but it's good. TTYN. Colourpop needs to stop using abbreviations for their eyeshadow shades, because I don't understand what it meant. I called, in case you missed it, from the Sweet Talk palette, Isimi, because I don't know. I'm not slang. I'm not up to date on AAVE language and just slang in general. So yeah, but I really, really enjoy this palette. I think this is a standout neutral palette. I love the shimmers. This gold is stunning. I love the glitter because it's like a gold glitter, but it has some like orange and red, like little micro glitters, for lack of better words, in it. And it just helps, if you use a gold and like a red, it helps pull everything together. I love this palette. It's perfect for fall, and I just really, really recommend it. All right, next is the Klarity Cosmetics Juicy Peach palette. Now she is pretty big, but luckily I can bend her back this way. So Juicy Peach palette, I love this palette because I think it also pairs well with another peach palette that I have in here, and it also pairs well with my Orangey Glad palette, where if I want to use more oranges but not really delve into like the pinks, I can pair it with that. If I want to use more of the like super like true peach shades, I can pair it with that. And I really, really like Klarity Cosmetics formula. The matte formula is a little bit like touch and go for some people because it's very, very dry but very, very pigmented. So what I would suggest is use a very, very tacky, like almost still wet, sticky base. That helps like really stick everything, but also do your eyeshadow before you do your base makeup if you're gonna use a Klarity Cosmetics palette. But the shimmer shades are phenomenal. I don't know if you can tell on the camera that this is more of a duochrome, kind of. It's like a peach into a very reflective gold. This is kind of like a glitter. I guess I could compare it to like the Colourpop Super Shock shades, but if you could like actually see the little glitter fragments, what am I thinking? Pigments? Little glitter things in a palette. That would be this. I love Are You Peaching Me? Ugh. I just think that this palette is wonderful, both by itself and paired with other palettes. And it's very, very easy to create a look from it. I don't know if it's still available, but I know that a lot of the shades are singles on their website, so I'll link what I can down below. But just for me, I really, really like this. I hope they bring this back. They created like a mini version, for lack of better words, around holiday time, but that was also limited edition. If they bring this back, I hope they bring back the mini version because it was a little bit less expensive, but you still got the amazing like quality stuff just for smaller palette that you don't have to hold and a little bit better price. The next palette is the Colourpop Off Melrose palette. She looks like this. I actually tried to do a palette comparison between this and the ABH Soft Glam, and it didn't work. It did not work. I prefer this I prefer this palette to the Soft Glam palette just because there are more like range of tones. I feel like this is better for darker skin tones with some of the tones down here. I love this glitter, and this is maybe my favorite rose gold shade ever because I like my rose golds to be a little bit more like coppery as opposed to like cool toned and silver. but I just think that there's a very large range that you can get here. This is a duochrome, this is a glitter. I know that not a whole lot of people like it, but I just feel like I get more use out of these shades than I do from, and I get much more like a variety of looks from this than I do from Soft Glam. They still weren't like similar enough to like compare, but they're similar enough when looking at it that I just feel like this is better, for lack of better words. It's so hard to like talk about like something that you can compare but also cannot compare. But yeah, it is just a very neutral, basic, cool toned palette, but I think it's very good. But yeah, I'm happy that I don't have like 2 exact repeat palettes, and I'm happy that I bought this one. So this is a very like strange way to put this. Oh my goodness, how am I gonna, what can I, it's difficult to try to like justify a cool tone neutral palette in general. I don't have a lot of cool tones, so that's new for me. I just like it. How about that? I just like it. Yeah, I just like it. Next is my ABH and Jackie Aina palette. Here she is. She is pretty well loved. I haven't hit pan in any of the shades yet. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really close on like this corner of Trust Fund. It's really difficult to see. This is a palette. This is the main palette that I was talking about, how I have to use, what was the other? Orange You Glad. I have to use Orange You Glad with this palette just because it is not made for my skin tone. That is completely fine. This was made by a Black woman for Black people, so I have to I have to make it work for me, but that's fine. Not everything is going to be made for me, and I'm okay with that. I can make it work. So yeah, in order to use like these 2 shades as like oranges, I have to kind of mix them with something in Orange You Glad. I do have to just like kind of dip in to lighten it for me, but that's fine. I get more use out of all my palettes, right? Right. I really like Zam and Wigglies. This is my favorite like red shade in a palette. It's just such a stunning red shimmer. Zam is a very flaky rose gold, but still good. And I just really like it. I like the thought that was put into it. I like that it's like bright and colorful, but like also kind of business executive over here with like the browns and the gold and the soft shimmers. I think this is a very well put together palette. Yes, I have to kind of dip into other things to like make it work, but I'm also not the type of person that minds, so yeah. The next one I'm not gonna open and like display like this open, and I'll tell you why in just a bit, but it is the Colourpop and Star Wars The Child. A Child palette. So yeah, just gonna put the graphic up. I love greens. Like my top 3 favorite colors are orange, red, and green. And aside from really liking greens, I really like olive. Sorry, I'm like looking at it down here. I think this does a variety of greens very well. I think this is the perfect size for this palette. Like if it were a 12 pan palette, I think it would just be like too much for some people. But I really like Float Your Crib and Little Frog as like the darker greens. I like Babyface as like kind of a mid-tone to mint. My favorite shade is The Force. It is a stunning shimmer, but it arrived in my palette kind of broken and I had to press it down. So I'm kind of hesitant to like hold it up and show everyone, but it is a stunning shade, and I like that they have a kind of like mid-toned neutral matte and a dark brown matte. I think both of those help really well. Also kind of like a silvery green shimmer and like of course a super shock shade. I just think that this palette is very well put together, very constructed. It's you know what you're getting. You can make a variety of looks, but also it's not like, it's everything to me that a green palette should be. It isn't too big. It knows what it wants to do. It wants to, it wants to have the colors of Yoda, and it has the colors of Yoda, and that is fine. On the subject of green tone palettes, I have to mention Lois Cosmetics Meet Me in the Underworld. This is a stunning palette. It has a great formula, a nice mixture of colors. It's like a red and green with a little bit of neutral palette. I love this palette, and it makes me very excited to see what Lois Cosmetics, a relatively new indie brand, has in store for us next. I would love to see them continue on with the mythological like storytelling palettes, but I don't want them to get like trapped into that little box, you know, where they can only do like Greek inspired themed palettes. But this is great. This is a good palette, and I like mixing it with other palettes. Off camera, I did use the Star Wars palette and this one because this has more like foresty greens, just to kind of see how they meshed. And the Lois Cosmetics formula is friendly, for lack of better words. Like, it does mesh well with other things. I've used this palette I think twice on my channel, but I have used it off camera a lot. I just really like this palette. I think it's an excellent formula. The brand owner seems really nice, and I know, like, I've heard that customer support is really good, and that like not a whole lot of people have needed customer support, of course, but sometimes customer support can make or break a brand for me and like a lot of people. Should you need customer support, she is very good. And the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice is a very tragic love story, but this palette makes me just happy. Like, look at that art. It's just good. It's simply good. It's just good. If you want greens, if you want reds, if you want a lot of bang shimmers, get the Lois Cosmetics Meet Me in the Underworld palette. All right, the last Colourpop palette and the penultimate palette in general is the Colourpop Sweet Talk palette. I hate this background. This might be a little, I hope this isn't like too trippy for everyone, but this was the palette that I bought at the same time as the Orange Glad palette. I still worked at Ulta at the time, and it was just really, I wore the two all the time together, separate, whatever, and guests would get so angry that they couldn't buy the eyeshadows in Ulta at the time. This was before Colourpop was in Ulta, but I love this palette. This is what made me fall in love with Colourpop glitters. This is what made me fall in love with like pink eyeshadow. I used to hate the thought of like pink eyeshadow. This is like coral and peach, and I love it. This palette just does everything for me. There are some shades that like I don't like to use. Like, I don't like to use Catch Me. It's just a little too light, and you know how I feel about the Super Shock shades, but I use them inner corner brow bone as a highlight, whatever. I get through them, but I love this palette. My first palette comparison was comparing this palette to the Costa Coral. Don't make fun of my eyebrows. I know that they were bad, but this is still a standout palette. This is probably one of Colourpop's most standout palettes that they've had. They've had it for a long time, and whenever they first released it and for like the next couple restocks, they could not keep it in stock. Obviously, as Colourpop has kind of grown, they've had better known things, and this kind of does stay in stock for longer now. Obviously, if there's like a sale or something, it goes pretty quickly, but this is a great palette. Like 3 years later, and I still really like it. And this is what made me fall in love with Colourpop. This and Orangey Glad. I use it with a lot of other things. I use it by itself. I just love that palette. All right, the final palette is the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. So I wouldn't describe this as like a rainbow palette. There is like a range of everything in here, but it is very neutral. I like this palette because that's a very difficult question. I did a 3 looks 1 palette / palette comparison video with this on my channel, and it was my first time using it, and I've used it pretty often since then. That video is now corrupted, and I don't know how or why that happened, and I'm very sad. I might redo it, I don't really know, but I love the olive tones. I love the 2 pops of blue. This red is wonderful. I love that there's a very big range of shimmers and mattes, because if you are going to buy a $129 Natasha Denona eyeshadow palette, I think that it should have a lot of shimmers in it, because shimmers are what she's well known for. And I mean, it looks like half the palette is shimmer, half the palette is matte. My only gripe with this palette, the only gripe I have with it period, is that like Enigma and Symbol, they're the same shade. I've swatched them out. I cannot find a difference or why these two were needed. At first, I thought that they had accidentally put the same shade in twice for me, because that's, funnily enough, that's happened to me before. That happened to me with Colourpop. I bought their California Love palette, and it came with 2 of like the orange shades like right next to each other. I contacted Colourpop customer support. They wanted me to send the palette back, and they sent me a new one. It was fine. But I thought that that had happened again. But nope. It's just like that. And who needs two like somewhat matte? They're kind of like a shimmer matte, not a shimmer matte. They're kind of like a satin matte, like navy blue shades, not me. This one is on thin ice, but it's a green and it pairs well with a lot of the other greens. But that is my only gripe. There's so many shimmers, so many tones. I've seen people like rearrange this into something that is more usable for them. That's something that I really, really like about Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes, is that they're magnetic. You can pull them out, you can rearrange it, whatever you think would be a more usable palette for you, you can do with it. And I love that. Do I recommend spending $129 on this? Yes and no. It's weird. Now the price point is pretty steep. It is $129. It is the most expensive eyeshadow palette that I have bought, but I do really like it and I feel like I get a lot of use out of it. And again, like her shimmer formula is just outstanding, and yeah. That is my last palette. So that is everything. So comment down below. Let me know what palettes are your like standout palettes. It doesn't have to be 10 or anything, but just let me know if you could only use a couple of palettes, what would they be? I'm very interested to see what you guys think down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.